यस, गुड मॉर्निंग स्टूडेंट्स। देखिए, हम बात कर रहे थे कोफिशिएंट ऑफ रेस्टिट्यूशन से रिलेटेड। हमने कोफिशिएंट ऑफ रेस्टिट्यूशन की डेफिनेशन देख ली थी। यस, नाउ द नेक्स्ट इज द वैल्यू ऑफ द कोफिशिएंट ऑफ रेस्टिट्यूशन। Value of the coefficient of restitution, that is E। देखो E की वैल्यू थी क्या? E is that is the impulse of reformation to the impulse of deformation। Right, it is E is impulse of reformation divided to the impulse of deformation। अब देखो E की वैल्यू अब डिपेंड कर रही थी, हमने एक फॉर्मूला और डिराइव कर लिया था कि E is that is equal to velocity of separation by velocity of approach। It is equal to velocity of separation by velocity of approach। Now we can say this thing कि अगर मैं देखूं for the elastic collisions या फिर if E is 1, अगर E 1 है तो इसका मतलब velocity of separation is equal to velocity of separation। अगर E हमारा 1 है तो E 1 कब होगा? when it is equal to 1, then these two things are same। or you can say impulse of reformation is equal to impulse of deformation। so you can say impulse of reformation is equal to impulse of deformation। right, and if E is equal to 1, these two are equal, and if the body is getting the fully deformed and it will get the restore again, fully restore, तो हम क्या कह सकते हैं? we can say this thing कि अगर वो fully restore हो चुकी है तो it means it's a which collision? elastic collision। that is no loss of kinetic energy। right, the next one is that is if E is equal to 0। अगर E 0 हो तो it means the velocity of separation is 0। velocity of separation is 0, it means both will move together। if E is 0, then velocity of separation is equal to 0। if the velocity of separation is 0 for the E equal to 0, so you can say this thing कि both will move together। after collision, that is perfectly inelastic collision। third, if E is greater than 0, less than 1, अगर E 0 से बड़ा और 1 से छोटा है तो we can say the velocity of separation is less than the velocity of separation by its velocity of approach if E is greater than 0 and less than 1। तो we can say कि यहाँ पर क्या होगा? इस टाइम पर जो velocity of separation it is less, मतलब impulse of reformation is less than the impulse of deformation। तो you can say impulse of reformation less than impulse of deformation. If it is less than the impulse of deformation, तो you can say this thing कि if impulse of reformation is less than the impulse of deformation, ये चीज इससे छोटी है, when it is less than 1, तो you can say it is a inelastic collision. It is a inelastic collision, right? So we can say these things for the E value for different types of collision. Like when there is E is equal to 1, it is an elastic collision. When E is equal to 0, it is which collision? It is perfectly inelastic collision. When E is greater than 0, less than 1, then it is inelastic collision. This is the thing, right? Next is general equation of velocities in head-on collision. If these two are moving with, let's suppose we want to derive the general equation. Let's suppose the two balls are moving with U1 and U2. Their masses are M1 and M2. And these are moving with U1 and U2. And after the collision, it starts moving. M1 will start moving with V1 and it starts moving with V2. Right? So it will start moving with different velocities after the collision, that is V1 and V2, and before the collision their velocities are U1 and U2. Of course, if it is colliding, then you can directly say that here U1 is greater than U2. And if it is separating, then you can say V2 is greater than V1. Right? So we can write some equations between them. First, that is a conservation of momentum. Conservation of what is the conservation of momentum? It is the initial and it is the final. So you can say the whole system, because at the time of collision, the forces that acts between the particles, between the molecules, between the bodies, that is the internal forces of the whole system. So you can say momentum is conserved. If momentum is conserved, so you can say plus M2U2, it is equal to M1V1 plus M2V2. This is the thing. And second, we can calculate, we can write one more equation for coefficient of restitution, which is velocity of separation by velocity of approach. So we can write for velocity of separation, what is the separation velocity? It is V2 minus V1. And what is the velocity of approach? It is U1 minus U2. From there you will get V2 minus V1 is E times U2 minus U1. Right? If you look at these two equations to calculate the value of V1 and V2, we have to modify some things. This is the second equation and this is the first equation. अगर आप इनको दोनों को सोल्व कर रहे हैं तो वी कैन कैलकुलेट द वैल्यू ऑफ V1 एंड V2 इन द फॉर्म ऑफ M1, M2, U1 एंड U2. राइट? देखो, बिकॉज हियर इट विल बिकम V2 माइनस V1. अगर मैं फर्स्ट इस इक्वेशन को सेकंड इक्वेशन को M1 से मल्टीप्लाई करके ऐड कर दूं तो इट विल बिकम व्हाट? It will become M1 into V2 and here it is M2 into V2. So it will become V2 into M1 plus M2. If we add with M1 से मल्टीप्लाई करके इसमें क्या कर दे? ऐड. M1 से मल्टीप्लाई करके ऐड करेंगे तो this will cancel out. This will become M2 V2 plus M1 V1. Right? फिर उनको अगर देखूंगा, if we have multiplied with M1 तो U1 की टर्म वहां से क्या आ रही है? दैट इज E इंटू माइनस ऑफ M1 इंटू E इंटू U1. मैंने M1 से मल्टीप्लाई करा, M1 V1 कैंसिल आउट, M1 V2 प्लस M2 V2. V2 कॉमन ले लिया, दैट विल बी M1 प्लस M2. अगर मैं M1 से इसको इधर वाले को टर्म को उसमें ऐड करूंगा तो क्या बनेगा? U1 की एक टर्म कॉमन आएगी, दैट विल बिकम M1 इंटू U1. U1 और M1 सेम आएगा, M1 और U1 कॉमन आ जाएंगे. यहां से आ रहा है माइनस सी और वहां से प्लस, 1 माइनस सी प्लस. अगर U2 की टर्म देखूंगा तो इट विल बिकम U2 इज कॉमन, दिस विल बिकम M2 प्लस E M1, M2 प्लस E इंटू M1. तो फ्रॉम देयर V2 विल कम आउट टू बी that is U1, that is M1 by M1 plus M2 into U1 into 1 minus E, and it will become M2 plus E M1 divided by M1 plus M2 into U2. This is the thing becomes, right? अगर हमको V2 निकालना है, this is the term for V2. अगर हमको V1 निकालना है तो देखो क्या करो, अगर V1 निकालना है तो इस टर्म को V2 से मल्टीप्लाई करके उसमें से क्या कर दो? सब्ट्रैक्ट कर दो, या फिर इसको इसमें सब्ट्रैक्ट कर दो V2 से. इसको इसमें सब्ट्रैक्ट करेंगे, पहले इसको M2 से मल्टीप्लाई करो. अगर M2 को मल्टीप्लाई करेंगे, M2 V2 गायब, here it will become M1 V1 minus of this M2 V1. तो V1 कॉमन आएगा, इट विल बिकम M1 प्लस M2. राइट? एंड हियर इट विल बिकम दैट इज M1 U1 प्लस M2 U2. और हमने इसको M2 से मल्टीप्लाई कर दिया. अगर M2 से मल्टीप्लाई उसमें से इसको सब्ट्रैक्ट करेंगे, इसको उसमें से सब्ट्रैक्ट करेंगे तो इट विल बिकम M1 U1 एंड दिस विल बिकम M2 इंटू E U1. और सब्ट्रैक्ट करेंगे तो क्या बन जाएगा? अगर U1 कॉमन लूंगा it will become M1 plus E M2. That will become M1 plus E M2 plus, अगर उसको उसमें सब्ट्रैक्ट करूंगा it will be M2 U2 और this is M2 into E U2. तो बनेगा क्या? U2 into 1 minus E. तो what is the value of V1? That will come out to be M1 plus E M2 divided by M1 plus M2 into U1 plus M2 by M1 plus M2 into U2 into 1 minus E. Right? So this is the term for V1. Term for V1. This is for V2 and this is for V1. And if we discuss it for elastic collisions only. For elastic collision के लिए E का वैल्यू कितना हो गया 1, E is equal to 1. अगर मैं E को 1 पुट कर दूं यहाँ पर इलास्टिक कोलिजन में E को 1, तो दिस विल बिकम 0. For elastic collision, that is the velocity of separation is equal to this. If we put the elastic collision, what is the value of E for elastic collision? For elastic collision, this will become, yes please, लिखेंगे इसको. Yes, next देखेंगे please. The next is general equations of velocities in head-on collision. मान लो मैं मान के चल रहा हूं it is moving with m1 is this, this is m1, this is m2. Before collision, these are moving with U1 and U2. And after collision, it starts moving, let's say with V1. And this starts moving with V2. So, देखो, first we can write by conservation of momentum. By conservation of momentum, you can write m1 into u1 plus m2 into u2. It is m1 v1 plus m2 v2. This is the first equation. And second, you can write by coefficient of restitution. What is E? Of course, अगर ये collision हो रहा है तो यहाँ पर ये चीज जरूरी है. And here V2 should be greater than V1. Now what is E? E is velocity of separation divided by velocity of approach. Means it will give V2 minus V1 E times V1 minus U2, U1 minus U2. This is the equation 2. Now, if we calculate the value of V1 and V2 by eliminating them, so we can calculate the value of V1 and V2. देखो कैसे. फर्स्ट, अगर मैं देखो इन दोनों इक्वेशन में से मेरे को V1 और V2 एलिमिनेट करना है, मैं इसमें से M1 को मल्टीप्लाई करके इसमें ऐड करूंगा. M1 को मल्टीप्लाई करने गायब हो जाएगा, वहां बनेगा M1 V2, यहाँ बनेगा M2 V2. तो V2 इज कॉमन, दैट विल बिकम M1 प्लस M2. राइट. अगर मैं उधर वाली टर्म्स को देखूंगा, उधर क्या बनेगा M1 U1 प्लस M2 U2, और यहाँ पर M1 की टर्म है तो यहाँ पर प्लस C की टर्म आएगी. दैट विल बिकम M1 U1, और ये क्या बनेगा M1 से मल्टीप्लाई करूंगा तो M1 इंटू E, तो E इंटू U1, दैट इज M1 इंटू U1, M1 इंटू E U1. तो M1 इंटू U1 will be common, that will become 1 plus E plus दूसरी टर्म क्या आएगी, m2 u2, और इसको ऐड करेंगे तो क्या बनेगा, दैट इज u2 विल बी कॉमन, दैट विल बिकम m2 माइनस em1. So what is the value of v2? v2 will come out to be, that is u1 into 1 plus e, that is m1 by m1 plus m2 into u1 into 1 plus e plus m2 by m2 minus e m1 by m1 plus m2 into u2. This is the value of v2. This is the value of v2. Now what is the value of v1? देखो v1 निकालने के लिए हम क्या कर सकते हैं, v1 निकालने के लिए आप क्या करो, इस इक्वेशन में से इस इक्वेशन को m2 से मल्टीप्लाई कर दो और ये इक्वेशन जो है इसमें सब्ट्रैक्ट कर दो. अगर हमने v1 निकालना है तो इसको सब्ट्रैक्ट कर दो. जब आप इसको m2 से मल्टीप्लाई, m2 v2 माइनस m2 v2 कैंसिल, इट इज m1 v1 माइनस दिस, तो प्लस m1 v1 बनेगा, दैट विल बिकम v1 into m1 plus m2. और अगर आगे देखेंगे तो इसको हमने m2 से मल्टीप्लाई कर दिया तो u1 वाली टर्म क्या आ रही है, इसमें से इसको सब्ट्रैक्ट कर रहे हैं, इसमें से इसको सब्ट्रैक्ट कर रहे हैं, तो दैट विल बिकम u1 इज m2, दैट इज m1 माइनस e m2 प्लस, जब इसमें से इसको सब्ट्रैक्ट करेंगे तो ऐड हो जाएगी, इट इज m2 u2 एंड दिस इज आल्सो m2 into u2 into e, तो m2 u2 कॉमन into 1 plus e. So what is the value of v1? v1 is m1 minus e m2 by m1 plus m2 into u1. And what is the value of this? It will be m2 into 1 plus e by m1 plus m2 into u2. This is the value of v1, right? अगर हम सिर्फ डिस्कस करें फॉर इलास्टिक कोलिजन्स, फॉर इलास्टिक कोलिजन्स E is equal to 1, E1 होता है, E की वैल्यू 1 डाल दो उसमें, तो अगर 1 डालेंगे तो हम क्या निकल के आ रहा है, देखो v1 क्या निकल के आ रहा है, v1 will come out to be m1 minus m2 divided by m1 plus m2 into u1. E की वैल्यू 1 डालेंगे तो it will become 2m2 by m1 plus m2 into u2. And what is the value of v2? अगर वहां पे E की वैल्यू 1 डालेंगे तो it will become 2m1 by m1 plus m2 into u1. E की वैल्यू अगर वहां डाल देंगे 1 तो it will become m2 minus m1 by m1 plus m2 into u2. So these are the equation for the elastic collision. For elastic collision, for head-on elastic collision. Now, if for elastic collision, if I am discussing, if first case m1 is equal to m2 is equal to m1 m2 अगर सेम हो जाए, अगर m1 m2 सेम हो जाएंगे ये चीज 0 हो जाएगी और ये कितना बन जाएगा 2m by m 2m, that is v1 is equal to u2. और अगर इसमें करेंगे तो चीज जीरो हो जाएगी, that is 2m divided by 2m, that is v2 is equal to u1. मतलब if masses are same, then during elastic collision becomes interchange. Gets interchange. Right? If m1 is very greater than m2, अगर m1 m2 से बहुत बड़ा है तो it will become m1. m1 plus m2 is also become m1, and here it will become, that is what, m1 अगर m2 से बहुत बड़ा है तो m1 रह जाएगा, that will become 2m2 by m1 plus m2 into u2. और अगर m1 m2 से बहुत बड़ा है तो tends to 0 करेगा, तो v1 will come out to be u1. But if we calculate the value of m1 in this case, अगर m1 m2 से बहुत बड़ा है, ये m1 बचेगा, m1 से m1 कैंसिल हो गया, यहाँ क्या बचेगा, माइनस ऑफ m1 बचेगा, माइनस m1 और नीचे m1 तो कैंसिल होगा, तो that will become 2u1 minus u2. तो ये भी हम डायरेक्टली ध्यान में रख सकते हैं. If m2 is greater than m1, then v2 will become equal to u2. And second, you can say v1 is equal to 2u2 minus u1. 2u2 minus u1, that is the thing, right? ये चीज आपको ध्यान में रखनी है for the elastic collisions and simply for the head-on elastic collisions. Next, write down the question now. Two balls of identical mass moving with two balls of masses identical, मतलब इसको m and 2m are moving with velocities v and 2v in opposite directions. Calculate their velocities after collision. If collision is elastic. This is the figure for it. This is M. This is moving with 2V. This is moving with V and this is moving with 2V. This is 2M. They will collide, and due to the collision, they will collide elastically. And after collision, let's suppose it start moving in this direction with V1 and V2. So we have to calculate the value of V1 and V2. देखो हम क्या कर सकते हैं. First you can write by conservation of energy, momentum, conservation of momentum. It is moving in this direction, it is moving in backward. So what is the initial momentum? M into V minus 2M into 2V. And then it is moving with in this direction, so we can say 2M into V2 minus M into V1. Here it will get minus 3mv. It is equal to M से M खत्म हो जाएगा. टू V2 minus V1. Next for coefficient of restitution, E is equal to 1. अगर E 1 है तो we can say what? It is velocity of separation by velocity of approach. What is the velocity of separation? That is V1 plus V2. And what is velocity of approach? That is V plus 2V. If we add these two things, that is 2V plus V, 2V2 plus V2, that is 3V2. 3V2 is 0, so what is V2? V2 is 0. If V2 is 0, so put it here. So what is V1? V1 is 3V. Right? So this is the case of elastic collision for this problem. Is it clear to all of you? Yes. Next. A bullet of mass 2 gram is moving with 500 meter per second. Penetrates a bomb of mass 1 kg connected with 1 meter cord. If it penetrates with 100 meter per second, then calculate height, maximum height to which pendulum can raise. This is the thing. It is the pendulum of mass 1 kg, and there is a bullet is moving of mass 2 gram. (500 meter per second). It collides and this pendulum will start moving, and bullet will start moving after penetration with V2 is equal to 100. We can say by conservation of energy, momentum. Now, by the conservation of momentum, you can say m1 into u1. It is equal to m2 u2. Plus, that is 1 into v2. That is 1 is equal to 0.2 plus v2. What is the value of v2? 0.8 meter per second. Let's suppose it rises up to height this. This is the theta. So it rises by an height. This is the h. This is L minus L cos theta. So you can say by conservation of energy between initial and final. One into V2, that is mgh. So what is V2? So what is V2? V2 is 0.8, and what is L? 1 meter. 0.08. You can calculate the value of theta from there, that is cos inverse of 1 minus 0.08, that remains. Is it clear? 0.92. This is the answer for it. Next, a ball of 10 kg moving with speed collides inelastically with the identical ball at rest. Ball at rest if after collision kinetic energy of system is 3/4 of initial kinetic energy then calculate value of coefficient of restitution that is Foley. देखो इसमें क्या होगा, यस सबसे पहले ये चीज है, it is a ball moving with V. Let's suppose it starts moving with V1. We can say by conservation of momentum, we can say and by coefficient of restitution we can say and we have given kinetic energy final 3/4 of kinetic energy initial half mv square three by 4 v square, that is v1 square plus v2 square is 3/4 v square. Calculate the value of this in the form of E and V. If we solve and add करें अगर तो what is the value of V2? V plus EV by 2. What is the value of V1? दोनों को अगर सब्ट्रैक्ट कर दे, दोनों इसमें से इसको सब्ट्रैक्ट कर दो, तो इट विल कम 2V1. And that will become V minus EV. इसकी वैल्यू यहाँ पुट कर दो. V1 is and what is V2? V square will cancel out. This will become 4, this will become 4, 4 उधर चल जाएगा. And it will become what? It is 1 plus E square minus 2, it is 1 plus E square plus 2, cancel हो जाएगा. तो it will become 2 plus 2E square, 2 cancel हो जाएगा. That is E square is equal to that will 1 plus E square is equal to 2, 1. E is equal to 1. 4 उधर जाएगा and this will become V square plus V square. That is, अच्छा V square cancel हो गया. That is 1 plus E square. That is 2 plus 2E square. 2 खत्म हो जाएगा. And that will become equal to what? A is equal to 1, right? So it's an elastic collision. Is it clear to all of you? लिखेंगे इसको please.